I'm not entirely sure where to start with a video like this. Um, you're gonna hear me saying a lot in this because this is something I'm doing unscripted. The reason for that is that I simply believe scripting this will make it more robotic and less genuine. But I wanted to make a video. I've been wanting to do this for almost a year now, I think. Sort of telling my story. I only recently started uploading to YouTube again with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Yu-Gi-Oh is an absolute passion of mine. I've watched most of the animes. I've played a lot of the games. I've played the actual Yu-Gi-Oh card game for years. I'm a very avid collector of the cards. But I wanted to restart my YouTube channel for a while now, and this just seemed like the right time because there's a certain hype around opening cards and card games right now. And I figured I'd jump on that because I open Yu-Gi-Oh packs every once in a while anyway. When I decided to make my return to YouTube, I changed my name. I changed my profile to better match my other social media. I'm mostly active on Instagram. And you might see the name and my profile picture and simply think it's just a name. It's just a edgy looking profile picture, but that isn't really the case. I'm Mr. Blindsight. I am an artist and I am also almost entirely blind, which is why the profile picture has an eye patch in it. Because I had to wear an eye patch for almost a year. There are days when I still have to wear an eye patch. And there's a very real chance that I will have to wear one again in the future. I started to lose my sight about 2 years ago. I'm a diabetic, and one of the things that you risk with type 1 diabetes is if you don't take care of it properly, you start to have complications. These complications vary from person to person, and even if you take care of your diabetes properly for years, it can still cause complications. Because of how I didn't take care of my diabetes when I was in high school, I started suffering from these complications from an early age. I don't entirely believe that mentioning my age will really add to this story, so I'll just say that I'm in my late 20s. And when all this started, I was in my mid-20s. The reason that I never took care of my diabetes is because I was very much depressed in high school. I still suffer from depression now, possibly more than ever. And it made me unable to take care of it. It being the diabetes. I was diagnosed with diabetes type 1 when I was 9 years old. At the time, my older brother already had diabetes. He was diagnosed when he was only 6 years old. So my parents knew a lot about diabetes. And after about a week in the hospital, I was sent home. Initially, everything seemed fine. My diabetes was relatively easy to take care of. I also had an aunt with diabetes. So my family was very much aware of how to take care of it, and for the first few years everything was fine. When I got into high school, however, my depression started to take over more and more, and I started to take care of myself less and less. This showed in other things than just my diabetes, and sadly, I had an incredibly hard time in high school. I'm always hesitant to say that I've been through a lot, but I think it's fair to say that I've been through a lot. I want to use this channel not just for Yu-Gi-Oh, but also to sort of tell my story. And hopefully throughout my story you'll learn a little bit about who I am and what I stand for. Mental health awareness is obviously a big one in this, which, as weird as this is to say, it's for selfish reasons. I wish people would understand me more, and I also know that there are plenty of people who feel that way. In an ideal world, we would all understand each other, obviously, but that isn't the case. When I was in high school, I almost completely stopped taking care of my diabetes. I have to give myself at least 4 shots of insulin every day. And I only did that once every day, which pretty much meant my blood sugar was always high. After years of this, when I was around 18 years old, I visited my doctor for a regular checkup, and she pretty much told me I couldn't go on living that way. She didn't say it exactly, but I always interpreted what she said as I wasn't going to live for much longer if I continued down this road. For whatever reason, in my mind, that meant that I wouldn't make it past 21 years old. Though she never actually said any number, that was the age that I linked it to. Around this time, my long-term relationship had ended, and my depression had started to become more prominent. I became less and less capable of taking care of myself. And although nobody knows this, when I was 18 years old, I made an attempt on my own life. I remember having a knife against my wrist. I'd like to say that looking back on it now, I'm glad I didn't do it, but my depression has really only gotten worse over the years. And around the time that I was 23 years old, I was at the eye doctor. Going to the eye doctor is pretty normal when you have diabetes, because your eyes are one of the things that can be influenced by your diabetes. And I was told they had to do surgery. It's a bit complicated what really happened. I don't fully understand it myself. I'm obviously not a doctor, so it's complicated for me to understand sometimes as well. But what happened was that my eyes didn't receive enough oxygen. To compensate for this, the eye would make extra blood vessels, but these blood vessels were unstable and they could start to leak. Although this wasn't happening yet, it was clear that my eye had started to make these blood vessels and they needed to prevent that. The surgery would consist of 2 parts, one of them being an injection which would calm the eye down and prevent further blood vessels from being developed. And the second part would be laser surgery, which would burn the existing blood vessels that were being made closed to prevent them from leaking. An important detail in this is that I needed to take care of my diabetes. And if I would have normal blood sugars, further damage could possibly be prevented. About a year after that, my left eye had started to bleed. And when you have an internal bleeding in your eye, you can see a giant blood spot and you can't really see anything else because it takes over your vision. After having my first surgery, I remember that I really wanted to take care of my diabetes, but I was still unable to. I remember that first surgery very well. I remember that I was laying on the table. They had given me the first injection and they had to do a second one. And although I remember that this isn't what happened, in my mind I stood up from the chair and almost walked out. What really happened was that I was actually laying still on the table and I was repeatedly yelling, "I can't do this." Although the eye is obviously numbed, the idea of seeing a needle get close to your eye is not something that's comfortable. It's even something that is shown in certain horror genres. And I was terrified. They actually had to hold me down physically. And it made me realize I never wanted to go through that again. Yet, no matter how much I wanted it, I was still unable to take care of my diabetes, no matter what I tried. And one night, I was discussing it with my mother, who said that it was weird that I wasn't able to take care of my diabetes. And although it was something that I had known for years at that point, I had never told my mother, my father, or really anyone that I was suffering from depression. I told my parents that night. My mother almost immediately realized that was exactly what was happening. She looked into some of the symptoms and I always had the idea that she blamed herself for not seeing it. It should be noted that up until that point I had been to 3 different therapists and I lied to each of them. There's something that I really don't want to be, and that is a good liar, but the fact of the matter is that I was lying convincingly enough that I could fool professional help people who could presumably read some kind of body language. I think I lied to all those therapists because up until that point I didn't want help. And now it had become more prevalent that I not just wanted help, but I needed it. After this, I started therapy. But even as therapy started, I was still unable to take care of my diabetes. It took almost a year before I was able to take care of myself in just this one aspect. And when I finally did start to take care of myself, it was already too late. My left eye had started bleeding. They had to do more surgeries, more injections, more laser surgeries. And as time went on, the blood in my eye didn't fade away. Sometimes it can fade away on its own, sometimes it doesn't. And this meant that I would have to have an even more invasive surgery. That's actually where I'm going to end this part of my story, mostly because of YouTube's time limit. But I will continue this in another part. Hopefully it will follow soon.